once again, one of our favorites from Sports Illustrated, none other than Albert Breer back here on the program. How you doing, Albert?
I'm good, Rich. I'm good. I don't know if this is going to be a plus appearance.
It is.
It's Albert Plus.
It's Albert Plus. Breer Plus.
Breer.
You know what Breer Minus is? You know what it is?
What's that?
Breer Minus is every November. You know what? Last two Novembers?
Yeah. Annual, the 2-year tradition. Yep.
Oh, baby. Just come and checking to see if you're awake here on this this May 25th. But it's kind of crazy. The comments from Mahomes, I don't know if it's because it's May 25th or we just know that Burrow and Herbert are coming to make him the 9th best paid, if you will, annual quarterback in the NFL. Making $40 million a year is nothing to sneeze at. But what he is the best in the sport, and I don't think there's any argument on that front right now. What did you make of his comments and the reaction to it in our NFL media world, Albert?
I think there's two sides to it. It's there's a rising ship lifts all boats, right? Like, and there is some level of responsibility players have to each other to do the best they can individually to kind of help every other player and make conditions better for those around you. But then there's the flip side of that, which is trying to do something for your teammates, and recognizing that, it is to some degree a zero-sum game that all these teams are playing, and when you pay your quarterback, it necessarily becomes more difficult to put the best team around that quarterback. I mean, that's why we've talked for a decade now about what an advantage it is to have a quarterback on a rookie contract, right? Because that allows for you to add maybe 4 or 5 players that are really good players on your team that maybe otherwise you wouldn't be able to have. So and that's sort of where it's at. And, I think Patrick Mahomes did that deal, and I can tell you this factually, with the idea in mind that he wanted to create cost certainty for the team going forward, not so much that they would get a discount on him, but just so they could plan. And so when they're doing Travis Kelce's contract or they're redoing Chris Jones's contract, they know exactly what they're dealing with at the most expensive position, and that allows them to fit in everybody around them. So, it'll be interesting to see because I do think, there's that model out there of how Tom Brady consistently did, I would at least call them reasonable deals with the Patriots. Now, there were some fringe benefits around that, but he did relatively reasonable deals with the Patriots all along, which gave the Patriots an edge in how they put together their team. Is Mahomes willing to do that? Can they do that without it being awkward? Because, with the Patriots and Brady, it did get a little awkward at the end when it came to the contracts. I think these are all open questions now because I think Mahomes has what, and I don't have it in front of me, I think it's 9 years left on the deal that he did, right?
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, if you're Patrick, do you go in, do you want adjustment? If you're the Chiefs, do you feel compelled to do that? And if you're going to do that, what's the right number that you can agree to with the hope that maybe you won't have to adjust it again for another 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Right, and then the question is what would be the tipping point, right? I mean,
right,
and is it somebody whose other whose work Mahomes does not respect, who now makes as much, if not more than him, for multiple seasons?
That's always what it is, right, Rich?
Right.
Look, I know it. What? One thing that's interesting on the Brady thing is, I think one that kind of got under his skin a little bit was when Garoppolo started making more money than him, and rightfully so, right? So I think that is a factor. Go ahead with your question, but I think that is a factor not to be overlooked.
No, but and Brady is the only one would say barometer we can use to measure this pressure situation that might be building, unless it's no pressure at all, that Mahomes can just turn that part of his brain off and just keep staring at the trophies that he drunkenly leaves in the hands of hands on the parade route. You know what I mean? Like having the time of his life. That's the question here, and the only reason why we keep asking it in the media over and over again is because that might be one of the things that could derail what is obviously one of the best built machines we've seen in recent football memory. What's going on in Kansas City right now?
Right, and I think it's how much look, like I think part of this is, and the Chiefs have been smart about this. I will say that. Like I can tell you, like it's funny because when we kind of went through like this NBAization of the NFL a few years ago, when Brady got out of New England, and then when Rodgers started to make noise and Russell started to make noise, and
Devontae Adams is another one.
Right. When all of that started to happen, I remember talking to the Chiefs about it. And I was like, well, if I'm Clark Hunt, I'd be going out to lunch with Patrick Mahomes every month and just say, hey, you all right, buddy? You need anything? You know what I mean? Like, and the response I got was like, they're legitimately doing stuff like that, like that they're very cognizant of like, of trying to keep him happy, almost to the point where like they do things for him. And there are some interesting things that they've done for him. There's one story like where they actually pissed off another player doing something, and Patrick didn't even ask for it. You know what I mean? But they did it for him. And, I think Patrick had to go to the team and say, look, you don't need to do that for me, But, like, there is that element of it where they don't want it to get to a point where he has to come to them asking for things, right? Like, they are smart enough, and I think the emotional intelligence of Andy Reid and Brett Veach and Clark Hunt comes in here where it's like, we want to be smart enough that, like, we want to be able to troubleshoot anything that might be coming. And I think that that's sort of where the idea of redoing this contract, or at least adjusting it for inflation, like that's, I think, coming more from the team side than the player side. And that's why you hear Patrick talking the way that he is. And I think that's why this is a good partnership right now, and will it be forever? I don't know. But I do think that's, one way in which the Chiefs have been smart about approaching it.
I'm mandated to ask, what was the thing that the Chiefs did that the Mahomes didn't ask and might have ruffled some feathers? What was that?
Yeah, I mean, I just heard I had heard it had something to do with access when access was limited during COVID, where – like, a lot of the stuff that they could do for players' families and stuff was limited during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And, so they made some concessions for Patrick's family and friends that he didn't really ask for, that, like, they weren't making that they had to kind of cut back with other people, and so
Mm-hmm.
it was sort of something along those lines. And look, like, I think, a big part of it for the Chiefs was, we don't even want to go to him and ask. Like, we want to make him comfortable, and we're going to do everything we can to make him comfortable. And I think to some degree, for Mahomes, it's like, dude, you don't need to do that. You know what I mean? Like keep my teammates happy too. But I think that there's that part of it, like where, you want to do everything you can to keep your best player happy. And, in some cases that's going to mean keeping the other guys happy too. In some cases that's going to mean making sure that Travis Kelce is happy and taken care of, making sure that Chris Jones is happy and taken care of, and then, when you're going the other way, the player like Tyreek Hill being very communicative with your quarterback about that, which I can tell you they were when they offloaded Tyreek Hill. When the idea first came up, the first call they made was to Mahomes himself.
Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated, here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers in New York City and New Jersey, where he was on Tuesday talking about, Jersey Shore, and he's watching a lot of TV, right? I mean, he told our colleague Adam Shine that he watched a documentary, maybe that Jimmy Kimmel 30 for 30 on the '86 Mets, just to give him an idea of what it would look like if he brought a championship to New York. Fully aware that there's a Long Island history with the Jets and the Mets and things like that. He seems pretty damn comfortable there, and the Jets are, as you were talking about, Chiefs trying to make Mahomes feel comfortable. Jets have done that for Rodgers, that's for sure. What do you think of the first couple weeks and how this might be a barometer for the season in New York?
Well, first, isn't that true though? Like you're an anomaly, aren't you? As like a Yankees Jets guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, isn't it normally Yankees Giants and then Mets Jets?
Well, for
right?
certain people of a certain age from the New York metropolitan area, you rooted for teams where they played in what stadiums. So that's usually Jets, Mets, Islanders. You're out there on Long Island, and then it would be Knicks, Yankees. The Yankees and Giants used to play in Yankee Stadium together. That's really old school. Me, my brother was the Jet Met guy, and I realized early on if I followed my brother with the Jets and Mets, I'd have no championships. Reggie Jackson came along, and I became a Yankee fan. That's the answer.
I got you. Okay.
So we
that's a good, tight explanation. I like that.
Yeah, I kind of feel that was like a 23andMe moment that we just had right there with the DNA. Okay.
Yeah, so I would say like what we're learning and what the people in the Jets organization are learning and have learned over the last couple of weeks is the kind of fishbowl they're going to be in. And look, I think like Aaron might be as equipped for it as anyone because people act as if like Green Bay is. I mean, it's not a big market, but it's not like some NFL like wasteland. Like that team, and you've been around them, Rich. They're as well covered as anybody. So as far as like the volume of reporters in the locker room and the number of beat people, it's not that different. I think the difference here is going to be the magnitude of the story, right? So I don't think it's so much New York versus Green Bay as it is the sort of fishbowl effect that this story is going to have. And I think this week's a perfect example of it. Like, you have one, Aaron Rodgers tweaking his calf, and that got covered like the moon landing, right? And then you have Alan Lazard getting banged up or whatever happened, and then having to go on Twitter to clarify because there was all kinds of buzz that came out of that, right? And, normally these sorts of things happen in May, and it's a footnote if you even realize what's happening with some of these teams. You know what I mean? Like, or okay, like guy tweaked his ankle, whatever. Like, he kind of limped off a little bit. He's back out there at the end of practice. He'll be fine. No need to push it in May, right? It's just different now. Like when you have legendary quarterback switching teams and going to a new place like that. And I think like what we've seen this week with the first set of like full OTAs and really what is the unofficial start of football practice with the Jets is that like everything that they do this year is going to be under a microscope. And so I think in a way it's like good that they're getting it out of the way now and that like the players, especially the younger players, are kind of like learn the landscape. So when they get to the season, they'll be ready for it. But I mean, I don't think there's any question, like, when we've seen the Jets in these sorts of situations before, the Tebow situation was kind of a funny one. The Favre situation obviously was very well covered. I think that's sort of what you're looking at, like over the next 3-4 weeks, as far as the way the team's going to be covered and scrutinized, and certainly when we get to training camp.
Obviously, as a Jet fan, you're looking for the trapdoor, and I'm like, I'm undeterred. I will not be deterred by any of this. But of course, a calf tweak in May just is a fresh reminder of just how old Aaron Rodgers is. Yep. That's it. What do you know about his regimen? Does he take a page from Brady? Does he reach out to Brady? Is there a TB12 connection here with his training and his regimen?
There's actually an interesting story there. So I go back. So this was probably, I'd have to look it up, but I think it was, I want to say 4 or 5 summers ago when I was with Rodgers. And, like he basically told me that he bought Tom's book. And at that point, I think he was 35, 36, whatever his age was. And he bought Tom's book, and he's like, I don't do all of it. He's like, I have like learned to like incorporate some of the things that Tom has done to create longevity for himself, like integrating like some things that he does into what I do. And so that was something that Aaron took a very like intentional look at. And his explanation it was actually like, I think a lot of people at that point were like, is he going to like how soon could this guy walk away? And he actually told me, he was like, it's a goal of mine to play until I'm 40 now. And and his logic on it was, I need something to shoot for. He's like, you can only be pissed off about being the 24th pick and having 23 teams pass on you for so long until that just doesn't motivate you the same way anymore. So he's like, my new thing is seeing how far I can take this and seeing how long I can remain at this level. And, I mean, I can tell you definitively that he went out and bought Tom Brady's book, that TB12 manual, and he incorporates some, not all, of the things that Tom's done over the years to create longevity for himself.
Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's talk about the new touchback rule on kickoffs, similar to college football. Anybody that is receiving a kickoff from the 25-yard line and in can wave their hand like a punt, catch the ball and the ball's placed on the 25-yard line. That's the way it's now going to be in the NFL. And the only way to describe the coaching community right now in the NFL is furiously pissed off, really upset.
Yep.
And this is a community that is absolutely, you ask them about the schedule, you're just playing when you play them. You know, you ask them about anything that goes down, it's just like, you just control the controllables. That's it. Now we know the rules, let's go for it. They are livid about this.
Yep.
What is the after effect? What's it going to look like in the NFL this fall?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, they're mad because of the way the league office handled it, Rich. I mean, plain and simple. Like this thing, my understanding is like I don't even think they were at 16-16 in the March meeting, right? And then on Monday, when they did a show of hands, I think the vote was somewhere around 18-13-1, with the one team abstaining being
the Raiders.
Being the Raiders.
Yeah, of course, they abstained.
And then overnight, Roger sent his people out, and Roger lobbied hard to flip teams, and he was able to flip about 8 teams. And so they wind up passing it 26-5-1. And they did it and they passed it in an owners only meeting. So essentially when they had the show of hands on Monday, Roger looked at the room and said, all right, we'll pick this up in the privilege meeting when it's only the owners in there. And I know Roger had said to some of the owners that, this is going to create liability for us because the concussions have gone up on kickoffs. And if we don't do anything about it, you're opening yourself up to losses, all that different stuff. I think the coaches are really pissed off because what changed between March and now? And were you just trying to force us out of the room? And then when it didn't work, it forced just us out of the room. Now you force the team presidents out of the room. And is that the way rules should be passed? Should they be passed on how people really feel about, the effects of them? Or should they be passed because somebody lobbied for 2 months to get them passed, And there are a ton of unintended consequences the coaches are worried about here.
Like what?
I mean, I know the special team. Okay, so special teams players got involved in this, right? The special teams coaches were 32-0, and they actually had a couple of veteran special teamers call around to special teams players across the league. And last week they got those guys, 34 guys, at least one from all 32 teams on a call. And they talked about all the unintended consequences, and the special teams coaches, players, all really against it. They're afraid that this is going to make the play more dangerous, not less dangerous, because the response to this, they believe, is going to be directional kicks into the corners. It's going to be squib kicks. It's going to be low liners. It's going to be all these different methods to kind of circumvent the rule, and they feel like on those sorts of plays, there's going to be more chaotic, less structured, more unsettled football. And it's going to lead, as they see it, to a lot of ugly football. And ugly football, as they see it, is where the injuries happen. And they've told the owners this. They told the league office this. I know they feel like they're not being listened to. Here's the other thing, Rich. Think about this. I had a coach bring this one up to me, and I'm sorry I'm being long-winded.
No, go for it.
But I know
go for it.
I know you're used to this with me.
No, it's all good. What do you got?
But this one's really interesting. So think about this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And a coach brought this scenario up, and it's fascinating. All right, so say I'm down 8, right, and I score a touchdown, and now I'm going for 2. Okay.
Yep.
So I go for 2, and the defense tells the defensive end, their pass rusher, just go knock the crap out of the quarterback. I don't care if it's late. Just hit him, right? Okay, so he hits the quarterback late. The quarterback gets hurt, all right? Say then a flag comes out. So you got a 15-yard penalty, okay? So now instead of kicking off from the 35, you're kicking off from the 50. But they just fair catch it anyway, so it goes to the 25. So what's the downside to hitting the quarterback late on a 2-point conversion?
Well, let me just play this out, devil's advocate.
Other than the FedEx coming from.
I was about to say the fine money. Secondly, the same could be done to your team's quarterback. Thirdly,
right.
So hold on a second. Let's just say if the 2-point conversion is unsuccessful, you wouldn't take the penalty yardage on the kickoff. You'd say, put me on the 1 and try it again, right? So you're actually putting your team in. Look, I
get the 2-pointer.
I understand. I understand coaches are coming up with the unintended consequences, and And I can totally understand what they're saying and why they're upset. To me, as a fan watching the game, nothing's more exciting than a kickoff. I mean, you could say it is the most exciting play in the NFL is a kickoff. And I'm going to say this later on when I kind of have a take, if you will, on it. Nyheim Hines returning the ball for a touchdown, not only once but twice on kickoffs with Damar Hamlin in the stadium is maybe one of the greatest moments in the history of the NFL regular season. And one of the greatest moments in the history of the Super Bowl was Devin Hester returning the opening kick for a touchdown when everybody was expecting it or expecting the Colts to not kick to him, and he did it. And this is now being removed from the game, and I understand this is a player safety issue. But to me, it doesn't this destroy the kickoff? I mean, it does destroy the kickoff, right?
It feels like it. It feels like it. And, I think, what's frustrating for the coaches and players is that they are working to give the owners solutions, right? And for example, they like the USFL one. You know the USFL rule?
Go for it.
Okay, so it's sort of counterintuitive. They move the kickoff back to the 25. So, because the kickers are so good now, they can probably still reach the end zone from there. And what you're doing is you're basically elongating the area that the players are playing in. And because it's less compressed, you're going to see more guys slowing down as they're pursuing the ball, more guys having to work a little harder to set up their blocks. And the idea is that, by doing that, you create less high-impact collisions. And apparently the USFL hasn't had an injury didn't have an injury on a kickoff all year. And so, there are other ideas that the coaches, the special teams coaches, would really be behind. And the head coaches, too. Look, I wrote it on Monday. There are 4 head coaches that are behind this. This is what's so frustrating for them, right? The 4 head coaches, Rich, that got behind the special teams coaches on this: John Harbaugh, Bill Belichick, Sean Payton, Dan Campbell. So you have 3 Super Bowl winning head coaches and another head coach who played over a decade as a player in the league, right? I mean, it's almost like you feel like if they're not going to listen to us now, they just don't care about what we say, period. That's the other part of it.
Albert, thanks for the time. Greatly appreciate it. Let's do this again real soon. Look for more of my calls and texts. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich.
You got it. Follow Albert Breer on Twitter. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.